hum of my sewing machine is music to my ears. I can remember as a little girl, sewing machines were loud and very mechanical, almost industrial. I still loved it when I could sit down and sew, making clothes for my dolls and for me. Hasn't technology come a long way? The quiet hum of a needle's going up and down makes me so thankful for the machines, fabrics, and wonderful threads we have today. Aren't you glad you can sew? I certainly am. Let's get started, and I would like to welcome you to my sewing room. This is a perfectly exquisite table runner, all done with my machine, of course. This is absolutely perfect, and I want to first of all look at this motif in the middle. Beautiful, beautiful, heavy cut work, absolutely exquisite with the wing needle holes in the middle, just perfect. Now I want to tell you a little secret. This motif was made on wash away stabilizer. Then the stabilizer was washed away, then it was transferred to the center of the fabric, zigzagged on, and as you can see through it. So the fabric behind it, after it was attached, the fabric behind it was cut away. Come on over to the edge of this table runner to see how beautifully it is done. Just pretty decorative stitches, wing needle entredot stitches, a beautiful pin tuck, pin stitches, which is done with probably a 100 needle, pin stitching to stitch down the beautiful lace, the French lace, another pin tuck, more wing needle entredot, and the most perfect scalloped edge you have ever seen in your whole life. Now there are some tricks to making this perfect scalloped edge that will not stretch, it will not pull out, and you know, anytime you use a table runner, you're going to have to wash it over the years. This will protect your scalloped edges. All of this was done by machine. Let's just see about those scalloped edges. Now then, you do a scalloped edge, you move in a little bit. You don't really sew it on the edge, you move in a little bit. And here is the scalloped edge done without the cording in it. Now it's very pretty, but there's a reason we're going to put cording in a little bit later. All right, here is the scalloped edge done with cording. This is a pearl cotton that has been put down, and at the same time the scalloping is done, the pearl cotton has been added. This shows you how when you do scallop with the pearl cotton, it's a little bit heavier and a little bit prettier. This is the scallop that's done with the pearl cotton. This is a scallop that is done without the pearl cotton. Now, before you trim away, and you trim very carefully, you're going to put a liquid seam sealant on this and let it dry very carefully. Let it completely dry, and then you're going to trim away the bottom of the machine scallop. Now this is the one that's been corded, and here is the finished scallop that has been corded, has a seam sealant, and been cut away. Now if you will look real carefully, I'm going to explain to you one more important thing about choosing the scallop on your sewing machine. This one, as we come up into the points, it has still some satin stitching there. Some scallops just come up to a point and then they come down and there's just a little bitty stitch there. You need to choose a scallop where we have pretty heavy satin stitching that goes from one side of the scallop to the other up in that point, or else the pearl cotton will not look pretty when you go up in those points. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today Darlene Guillory. Darlene is an educational consultant for FOF. Darlene, it is so good to have you here. Thank you, and what do you have for us today?
Thank you, Martha. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's look back at our scallops again. And this is the one that I've stitched directly on my fabric, and you can see a little bit flat. So we can make it more stable and prettier by adding our cording. Now the cording is simply heavier cording, and there are different cotton blends and rayon blends, and you can see that it is stitched in the well, you don't actually see it, but it is stitched under here, and so it does give it a very stable edge, and it makes it much prettier. So as you can see, you've got this edge here where I've stitched the scallop without the cording. And then here's our comparison where it's with the cording. So it does give it a raised edge, it just does more stability, and quite a bit prettier too.
I agree with you. There is a difference, and just in the way it looks, not just its strength.
Yeah. Once you finish stitching it, what you'll want to do is to use your liquid seam sealant, and it has a very fine point. You'll go right along the scallop edge, saturate this so that it goes completely through the front and the back, and then a nice little curved tip pair of scissors is going to help you to trim right around those scallop edges. So that will be the secret to stitching or to trimming. But let me show you the trick, Martha, of getting the cording in the fabric or in the scallop. The first thing you'll want to do is to draw your stitching line on your fabric, and I have already selected my scallop, and you'll want to take one stitch into the fabric to get the fabric or the needle in place, and I've let the presser foot lift just gently, just a little bit, and we'll take our cording and place it under the presser foot. You're going to go up through the little opening of the foot itself, right through here. And then as you're stitching, what happens is you see the needle stitches right over that scallop.
Huh.
But now this might be a little bit slow and a little bit difficult for you to move the cording as the scallop is stitching. So I've got another little trick for you to make sure the cording stays in the scallop. The little guide where your thread is going through that you're sewing with, you're going to just slide that cording right in there with it, and it'll be following wherever your needle thread's going, the cording goes. And you will need to just keep a little bit of gentle pressure on it, a little bit of tension with your finger and thumb. Hold it whatever feels good to you and let it slide right along. And as you stitch the scallop, no matter what needle position the needle goes to forming the scallop, the cording goes right under the thread.
Darlene, that is wonderful. And let me show one more, just to show this beautiful table runner again. I want to show this peach one you've done. And as you can see, this one does not have the fabric cut away from behind. Let me just turn it over. You have just zigzagged it down, and the fabric is not cut away. Now, do you usually cut it away, or sometimes do you leave it not cut away?
It depends on how much usage it's going to get and the effect that you want to look as far as the visual.
Darlene, thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful technique. And now Darlene has some beautiful things for your sewing inspiration. Darlene, this is one of my all-time favorite quilts here. Tell us about this easy chenille that you've used on it.
Well, Martha, I have just completed my stitch. I embroidered my blocks, I did my quilting, and then after I was finished stitching the quilt together, I stitched down bias strips, and they are just simply frayed.
And it looks like you have a rag quilt, but you didn't. Now, what about the little hearts around the edge, Darlene?
Those are quilted in the hoop, in the embroidery hoop.
Oh my goodness, this is so sweet. Absolutely an elegant pillow. Could you tell us about this?
Well, this was done in one hooping, and after I finished it, I went back and put the fun crystals and pearls on with the little heat tool.
I call those the glued-on diamonds.
Glued on diamonds.
It just makes a little sparkle, a little happiness. How pretty can you get?
On this little table topper, I have embroidered my different lace designs on water-soluble stabilizer. And then I purchased ribbon, and it has a very delicate wire in the very edges, so it gives it a little bit of stability. But how I've joined them is in this area here, I've used a little bridging stitch, and I've used 12 weight thread in the needle and in the bobbin.
And that is so pretty. And did you have to use any stabilizer underneath that?
No.
You just put them together and did that bridging stitch.
No stabilizer.
How beautiful. Now this is a little surprise underneath here. Tell us about the jewelry.
Well, this is something that I did with embroidery, and it's already embroidered, digitized for me. So all we have to do is put it in the hoop. These are lace earrings, lace pendants that I've done on water-soluble stabilizer. And then I have my 3D flowers, and these are stitched on little organdy or crystal organza. And then on the ones that you want to add those little jewels to, they're just glued on.
And the little earring, what do you call it, the little earring clasp, and there's even a little ring there?
Yes, a little ring to match and the little bracelet.
Oh, this is so, absolutely so pretty. Darlene, thank you so much for bringing these creative projects to share.
Thank you, Martha.
And now Darlene has a so quick, so easy project for you. Darlene, I think those are the prettiest little bags. Tell us how you made them.
Martha, these are wonderful bags for lingerie or for jewelry, and you can embellish them any way you'd like to. On this one, I've used a straight stitch outline that was a quilting design, an embroidery design pattern, and on this one I've done decorative stitches that formed a circle or the arcing, but they have the same scalloped edge we did earlier.
On the table runner.
Another thing that you could use the bag for is a little potpourri, and I made my own little sachet bag out of just tulle or netting and just cut a little square, zigzag the edges, and the reason I did this is because it keeps your potpourri together, and then you can simply slip it in the little bag, and if you ever want to change the scent you can just make another one. Now the part I'd like to share with you today is this wing needle stitching, because I've used it instead of a casing, and now then I can just draw this up and then tie it in a pretty little bow, and I'll have my little bag. So let's see how we've made it. I already have my scalloped edge stitched, and I now want to do the wing needle stitching, which is going to be replacing a casing. I'm using a size 100 wing needle, and I'm using a stitch that forms a flower, and the needle goes into the center repeatedly, and that will cause a little opening in the center of the flower. I also use this with wing needle stitching if I make it smaller to do a pretty little entree stitch.
I think we call that baby daisy entree, don't we?
Yes. And I'm doing a second row of stitching right now, and I use the edge of the presser foot for my guide. But you can see I still have the quilting guide on, which is wonderful if you want to put your decorative stitches a certain distance from the scallop. Once you've got your bag made, you're going to fold the right sides together, so one seam down the side, one seam across the bottom. And you'll want to then weave the ribbon. I have 1/8 inch ribbon, and you'll simply go in and out of the little holes, and this will be what will create your drawstring. So it's just going in and out and in and out. And this is a blunt tip needle, a very large eye, and look how easy this is going to run through.
How sweet and delicate and pretty, and you can run 1 or 2 rows to pull it in. I think those little bags are great little gift bags for any kind of small gift. What a nice surprise to get the bag too.
Yes,
Darlene, thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Now I have a machine embroidery tip for you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest Lindee Goodall. Lindee is Vice President of Creative Designs for Cactus Punch. Lindee, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Martha. It's good to be here. We have some really fun things today. We have some little baby knits, and these are just the softest little baby knits, and they have such cute little designs. So we have 2 little bugs on this one, and on these are little baby onesies, and we have just some embroideries on here, a little plain one up here and some more down on the chest. But this baby onesie, we have added a little skirt and added some trim on there.
Cute.
So we've turned it into a little girl's dress. And this is very easy to do. It's just a little gathered skirt, just a little plain hem, some little trim. You could make it yourself or use purchased trim. So it's quite easy. These are all embroidered on knits, and there's some tricks to embroider on knits, and that's the focus of what we're going to be talking about later. But here are 2 more things. Here's a baby burp pad, and here we have a baby bib. Now on the burp pad, we've embroidered all the way through. And you can see that we have a stabilizer under here, and it's still kind of stuck down because we use a temporary embroidery spray adhesive. And I hooped this lightweight no-show cutaway. You really need a cutaway behind knits because knits are very stretchy and they tend to distort. The cutaway will help stabilize your stitches and keep all your outlines lined up. So that's what you want to use. Now on this little bib, you'll notice there's no embroidery on the back. Both the baby burp pad and the bib are 2 layers. So it's 2 layers of fabric, 2 layers of fabric. And when you're working with 2 layers of fabric and you're sticking it down like we did here, you have to make sure that the top layer sticks as well. So we're going to baste in the hoop. And let's look at how we do that. Here are 2 little bibs. And they have this nice little trim around it, and this trim is actually added on after the bias is put on. And I'm going to take this bias off. So the bias comes off, you just unstitch it, just rip it out, and if there's any places where this trim has caught in here, just take your scissors and snip it out. You can see that here's a little place right here where I've snipped it away. You don't want to snip your trim off. You snip away the excess and the seam allowance. So I have my 2 layers separated, and I'm going to take my bib and lay it on top of my stabilizer. This is called hoopless embroidery. We still have to use a hoop, obviously, but our fabric is not between the rings of the hoop. And when I use this, even though my bib and my design would fit on here, I like to have this extra area of adhesion, so it helps hold it in place. Once I have it smoothed in place, I'm going to get it under the needle. Make sure your ties are out of the way, because I have been known to embroider the ties to the back of my bib.
That sounds like something that most of us would do at one time or
Yeah,
another.
we do it at
Now, how
least
did you get it
once.
to stick onto there?
I used a temporary embroidery spray adhesive.
Okay.
And I just sprayed right into the hoop. And I like to use a little hoop guard to protect my hoop from getting an overspray. But you just spray right onto the hoop. And I have my hoop a little off center here, but I want my design to be just a little casual, because it's just a little flower and it doesn't matter what the angle is. So you don't have to be real precise on baby bibs. So I'm going to go ahead and start my machine, and you'll see that it's just going to stitch a little square around my design. And this is a little bounding box that shows where the design will be. And a lot of machines will do this. So it will hold this in place so your knit is not going to distort. If your spray doesn't hold real well or your stitches start pulling, you have just this small area that it's going to pull into. So it really helps stabilize your design.
And Lindee, if you're working with the double layer, is that the same thing that you do to hold it?
Yes,
Just
you
to do
would,
that
you would
stitching?
definitely you'd need the basting stitch to hold a double layer. With a small design like this on 1 layer of knit, you might not need the basting stitches, but I like it for security.
Oh, Lindee,
Better
thank
safe
you.
than sorry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing these wonderful tips for embroidering on baby knits. And now I have a quilting idea for you. This beautiful green and ecru heirloom quilt has wonderful heirloom techniques. The one I'm going to share with you today is really lace flip-flopping, but it's flip-flopped into a diamond, and it almost looks like a column. So it's just quite an interesting technique. Here is the lace section, the quilted section. As you can see, the lace insertion is flip-flop, flip-flop, straight over flip-flop, straight over flip-flop, straight over flip-flop. Now it goes the other way too. Straight over flip-flop, straight under. Actually, it goes under that time. And see, this layer all goes underneath. But this is a very simple lace shaping technique. And if you'll notice, there are little, there's some insertion in behind here. So there's a peekaboo in behind there. So this is lace shaped flip-flop diamonds. It's very easy to do. Let me share with you how. Flip-flopping is one of the easiest techniques in lace shaping. There are only 3 techniques, actually. All right, the lace comes down here. I hold it with my hand and flip it over. And you might say, Martha, what about the right and the wrong side of the lace? Well, actually, laces coming out of France today do not have a right and wrong side. So I'm going to put a pin here, and then I simply fold it over itself, put another pin out there to hold it, and I come down. And then to do the other row, I do the same thing. Bring it over, put a pin here. I'll try to move my hands out of the way. Bring it down. You see it's flip-flop there. Put a pin here, hold it, and flip-flop it. It is so easy to do these beautiful, beautiful flip-flopped shapes which become diamonds. Now the idea is we're going to sew where the inside of this can be cut away and something inserted. Do you remember the insertion in the middle? So I'm going to sew down one side, down the flip-flop, other side. I'm not going to go over and over with the sewing, but I'm going to go here, 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 here. Now I can do a wing needle entredot stitch or a wing needle pin stitch, But for those of you that do not have the sewing machines with all the fancy stitches for wing needlework, today I'm just going to zigzag them because that is also a real good possibility. I do have a tearaway stabilizer behind it. Anytime I'm working with lace, which is very, very, very delicate, and the batiste, I always put a stabilizer behind it. Anytime I'm doing any kind of heavy stitch on a very, well, I don't mean to say flimsy, but on a soft fabric, I use a stabilizer. Okay, I come in and I turn around. Do you see how I'm sewing the outside of this lace shape? And I am simply zigzagging. Let me see, my width is 1.5 and my length is 1.0. That's very tight on the zigzag. All right, now I'm going to go back. That you go all the way down one side, all the way down the other side. Let me show you here. You see I have sewn down one side and then down the other side. And let me hold this up to show you what happens. I cut away the fabric from behind. I only stitch the outside. I cut away the fabric. See, there's a little peekaboo hole. And I have insertion, embroidered insertion, which I will place in behind, and the stabilizer is now gone because I have another piece behind it. If you want to be real secure, you could put another piece of stabilizer behind it when you sew. But I've put my insertion behind, so those wonderful little embroideries, just peekaboo. Next, I'm going to sew around each inside piece. And I'm going to sew again around each inside piece to stabilize it. Sew again around each inside piece to stabilize it. And that is how you insert anything on the inside of a lace shape. Let me review that just a minute. Okay, suppose it's a lace-shaped heart. I shape the heart, I press it, I sew what? The outside only. And I might even want to take an antique handkerchief or any kind of embroidery or machine embroidery piece. I sew the outside only. What do? Cut away the inside and then slip the embroidered piece or the handkerchief or whatever you're going to put in behind it. And then what do I sew? The inside edge, just the way I did this. Sew the outside, trim it away, slip in whatever I want to put behind there, and then sew the inside edges. And that's how you insert something behind lace. And next, I have an absolutely wonderful christening dress, about 1900 vintage, to share with you. This christening dress has so many interesting features, I hardly know where to begin, but I will. Very pretty neckline bodice, the high yoke bodice. It has the horizontal lace and insertions, Swiss insertions. Then it has the vertical pieces of beading with ribbon run through it, and this is the original ribbon. And I estimate this dress to be about made in 1900. And the pink ribbon is still run through there. Now, the most fascinating thing about this dress, if you will look carefully with me, right here in the bottom of these 3 tucks on the sleeve is a lone button. Now, there's nowhere to button that button to. It's on the front of the sleeve, and the button has been torn off, but there was one on the back of the sleeve. There are 2 buttons over there. Why that button is there, I do not know. If you can figure it out, you get in touch with me. I tend to believe this might have been a christening dress because many times the tucks or pieces or elements were put in the number 3, which if you will go back and study through history, when you put 3 somethings in a dress that was meant for a religious occasion, it probably stood for Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The dress is magnificent in the front. The vertical lace shaping with the V's, who have the beautiful French edging, the Swiss insertion, the French edging. It's been mitered into a beautiful V, and the ruffle on this dress is just simply beautiful. That's all I can say. Once again, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit for the tucks, probably. The beautiful wide ruffle has more of the sets of 3 tucks and beautiful Swiss insertions and a glorious Swiss edging on the bottom. This dress is just really beautiful and interesting too with those buttons. Thank you so much for joining me in my sewing room today. I'd like to invite you back next time.